All right, I think it is time for our final presentation of the day. I am back to introduce my mother, Tami Rich, who will be closing out the day. She'll be telling sort of our story, but I was born with congenital heart disease, diagnosed at 3 days old, and so for my entire life, and still, she has been my caregiver and my patient manager and medication manager and doctor manager and everything. She has quite the story to tell about what it's like navigating a situation like that. So.
Thanks, buddy. So, what a great day it has been to hear people tell stories, lived stories from being in the hospital, from navigating the system, from using everything at our disposal to make the health and care better for our loved ones and ourselves. So I want to ask you first to sort of think back a little bit to this morning and Naveen's ask. And I had the good fortune last year to go to Stanford MedX. And at that medical conference at Stanford, where patients are included, invited, it helps set the agenda and so on and so forth, they use this neat technique called asks and offers, where they said, when you walk away from this conference, and this may happen to us today, you can end up with a bit of a hangover, sort of what's the fix hangover, where you want to start everything right away. And one of the things, fortunately, that I learned early on as a medical mom, and Jameson's case momager, was to try to focus small. And so today, what I've been thinking about is, what is my offer? What can I bring to other people, and what can I share with them? And then what is my ask? What are my gaps? What do I want to go learn more about? And who can help me learn that? For me right now, it's design. I'm really fascinated by healthcare design. But so remember that those cards have a great home over there that you can, if you haven't put yours up, to make sure that you get to that before we end today. So to begin with, I wanted to just share a little bit about sort of back at the beginning of my life, and in my dreams, what did I want to be when I grew up? When I was little, I was the youngest of 4 kids. And in my family, we have Irish triplets, as they say. So my brother and sister are twins, and my sister Tracy came along 11 months later. And so, when you're, and I was about 4 years later, and so when you're 4, 5, 6 years old, you don't really get things like, the bigger world than sort of your view. And I kept bugging my parents for a little brother or sister. And that ship had sailed. And it probably should have sailed, I don't know, but anyway. But I started to say to everybody, I want to be around kids. Can I play with your kids? Can I hold the baby? That kind of thing. And I was figuring out what I wanted to do. And I said, well, there's a doctor that works with babies, only babies. I think I want to be that kind of doctor. So in first grade, Miss Wolford goes around the room and says, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she gets to me. And I say, I want to be an obstetrician gynecologist. I've never told this story before. And of course, the entire class in Framingham, Massachusetts, cracked up laughing. I turned bright red, and I immediately downsized my career goals because I knew I had sort of said something wrong. But I ended up working in a nursing home, and I was helping take care of my grandparents. My grandmother had Alzheimer's, which didn't even barely have a name back then. And I decided I'd go to nursing school. And so I got into a program, and it was incredibly hard. And I kept saying, well, just keep your eyes on the prize. You won't be in the hospitals for 2 years, but maybe you could be a psychiatric nurse practitioner or something like that. Well, in this moment between here and here, I flunked out of BU School of Nursing. And I thought, uh-oh, and I was sort of stuck for, now what am I going to do? And I had the really good fortune to find out that BU had cashed my dorm check for the next year, so they had to educate me. So I took night classes. I worked full-time days in the offices of a couple of health plans that were in Kenmore. And I ended up graduating on time with this degree in sociology. And I kept stumbling further into healthcare management. So that's what I ended up doing for several years. And it wasn't necessarily my dream, but I was learning a lot and I was growing, and that was pretty terrific. So I decided to get an MBA at night. And then my dreams coincided with my work. And the CEO of Quincy Hospital asked me to become a quality improvement coach and to get trained in quality improvement, not on the clinical side, but still helping with organizational development and training. So this is my background that brings me to the moment that I got to fulfill my other dream, which was, okay, was never going to be a big sister, but maybe I would be a mom. And so, yeah, it was time to welcome Jameson Maxwell to our family. A little video. Here we are.
Want me to throw that out for you? Want me to throw it out for you? Yeah, thank you.
Here we are on December 13th
me.
at 10:30 in the morning, despite what the clock says. It's the day before surgery. What's that?
You have x-rays, buddy?
I mean, can you say x-ray?
Okay, this is your debut on videotape.
Try to remember, but my feelings can't know for sure. Try to reach out, but it's gone.
This is our first night of Hanukkah.
Open.
I am
Happy birthday to you.
Thank you for taking that medicine, sweetie.
Is it your birthday? I really don't know.
Great, come here.
Okay, so we're planning on tomorrow.
Let me just go over some of the complications of the surgery that can happen.
I'm staying here. I am walking the cow.
So that was me behind the camera and the young man behind the editing booth for his senior film thesis project at school. So when Jamie was born, things were fine for a couple of days. He had pretty good second-round APGAR scores, so he was doing really pretty well. But Wednesday morning, a heart murmur was detected. And although we were assured almost immediately by everybody at Quincy where I worked, I delivered there, that 95% of heart murmurs are nothing. Didn't somebody say earlier today, when you experience the event, you experience it 100%? We ended up going for an echocardiogram at the floating hospital at Tufts Medical Center. And they thought that they saw some problems, but didn't want to state exactly what they saw. So they had admitted him his first admission for a cardiac catheterization and confirmed the diagnosis the next morning. It's sort of like if my heart goes like this and I have two outlets off my heart, his is like this, where one guy is over here, and we needed to sort of figure out how to make a surgical plan about what to do next. And when you think about somebody with illness, right? They have symptoms, they get a diagnosis, and that was consisted of the first 10 days of his life we spent with him in this other hospital. And finally, we got to go home. And that was spent by several weeks of anxious waiting while we waited for this slightly smaller heart center to make a plan with us. And we were sitting there listening to the plan, which involved 2 surgeries at the same time by one surgeon who had no experience doing the 2 surgeries together. He had no backup, and just in a fit of instinct or inspiration, as Jamie said earlier today, I looked at the pictures of the children on his desk, and I looked at the certificates on the wall that said he had been the chief cardiovascular surgical resident at Boston Children's, and I said, if this was your kid, what would you do? I mean, there's Aldo Castaneda right up the street in Boston Children's, and he was taken aback that we had even done any research in this pre-internet era. And he said, because he had studied under Aldo Castaneda, and he said, I think I would have to go there. So I said, can you get them on the phone for us? And things moved on from there. And when we met when we talked to Dr. Castaneda over the phone, he said, I'm on my way to Italy, I'm retiring, it's all quiet right now, but you see my very able colleague. And it happened very quickly at that moment where they said, come on Friday. And on Friday, we met a doctor named Gil Wernovsky, and that was also, that became really the most teachable moment in our lives to that point. This is the other video. Do I just click it?
My parents were given one piece of advice, though, when I was just a few months old that factored in greatly to how they brought me up. My cardiologist said to them once, don't treat him like he's fragile or like he can't do what other kids can for fear of injury. Sure, there are limitations, but the best thing you can do for him is to teach him that he is just like everyone else. That worked incredibly well, better even than they might even know. I still have this pretty vivid memory from 2nd grade. So I had my first open heart surgery when I was 6 months old, and ever since then I had a scar that goes from my clavicle down to my belly around here. And so to me, that's all this has ever looked like. So anyway, I remember 2nd grade, standing at the cubbies, putting my things away, kid next to me, and I look at him and I think to myself, I wonder how many other kids have scars like mine. And then with that little kid logic that a lot of them have, very quickly I said to myself, 50%? Like about half? Probably about half of all kids have this. I don't know where that number came from, totally made up, but it sounded right to me. And I looked over at this kid again and thought, I wonder what his scar looks like. I had to learn over time the ways in which I was different, rather than starting from a place of difference and having to find the ways in which I was the same. And that was a blessing.
So we're still in touch with Gil to this day, and when we get the chance, we thank him, because that really changed everything. So again, you think about this healthcare model, and now we're back in life 2.0 when he comes home from basically his first surgery, which happened that next Monday, and they got in there and saw things were a little different than they thought. So they had sort of prepared us for a plan B. So we were going to plan B, which meant 2 more surgeries before he was 3, and then maybe another one a few years later. And so, you think of it as illness and then treatment and then wellness. And that might have happened had he had just a simple hole in his heart that they needed to repair, some simple cardiac diagnosis. But the truth is he began to have this constant, going back to the hospital and being checked and so on and so forth. So, but it was, his care was well enough, even after those first 3 surgeries, to be a typical first grader and to fall madly in love with his teacher, Miss Chrissy, like every first grader does. But then an interesting thing happened, and he actually, I'm going to skip ahead for a second. While he was in her class, one day he had to go write something on the board, and as he stood at the board, he started to not feel good, and he started to. He told us later he started to feel really hot. And he started to feel a little sweaty, and his mouth got a little dry, and he got a little nervous. And then he felt his heart pound. And so he asked to sit down, and then Miss Chrissy said, you don't really look so good. Why don't you get out and see the nurse? And I got a phone call from the nurse, who said to me, Mrs. Rich, Jamie thinks he's having a heart attack. And I said, okay, well, he's not, like that's pretty impossible. And I realized he didn't know that. So Mrs. River-Nider said, I said, what do you think? And she said, I had him breathe into a bag and he's fine. I think it was just anxiety. But let's talk about the fact that this kid thinks, heart issues, they're in his life. Let's help him understand them a little bit better. So there's a brilliant coping clinic at Boston Children's Hospital, and we went to see our friend Marcus. And dude comes out with a piece of paper at the end of the first visit. He's mostly playing with Legos and stuff on the table, and we're gonna go, eat a cheeseburger in the hospital cafeteria. And he's got this piece of paper he kind of hands to me as he walks by, and I said, what's this? He goes, well, Marcus says, I want my life to be like this. Marcus says, I'm gonna have to deal with the fact that life is like this. And I thought, that is the most Zen piece of advice we should all be given in early childhood, to how to cope with the ups and downs of life. Now thinking back to my healthcare model for a second, right? Symptoms, illness, treatment, you get on with your life. Jamie's life looked like this endless loop though, right? We would have a care plan, you need to have an echocardiogram in 6 months, something like that. And then he would go back home. He would, had a fairly normal childhood in school. He would have doctor's appointments, and then he might get hospitalized, might have a test, might have ear infection for the 15th time, whatever, go back into the hospital, and then go back home again. The problem is, as people said earlier today, and as you all know, being in this world is very physician-centric and hospital-centric, like the old soap operas, Doctor's Hospital. And being here, I was trying to build everything around him and his life. So that can be a problem, especially for kids with special healthcare needs, because they're constantly on the move. And it becomes our job as a family to keep his life him-centered, to keep him at the middle of everything. So to recap, he had his diagnosis at birth. He had 3 open heart surgeries before he was 3. And then after that, we had what became a medical odyssey, essentially in 3 acts. The first thing that happened was, because early on in one of the surgeries, they had nicked his body's own natural pacemaker, his heart rate started to slow down a little bit. And a bunch of testing revealed it was indeed time for that first pacemaker. But he went into the hospital, a pretty healthy kid with 2 or 3 specialties, and he came out with 13. He developed a post-op surgical site infection. I've highlighted it in red for you because it's wholly preventable. And I didn't know that at the time until I got some more patient safety education. And life was really difficult and really challenging to tease out all these different, he had hematologists, he had hepatologists, he had infectious disease, immunology, allergy. He began to develop drug allergies and all these different problems. And Susanna Meadows has got me thinking it's time for me to go back and look at all those early antibiotics and how they may have contributed to some of the other connections that got made with him. But it was really when he was 12 and he got his second pacemaker that everything changed, because he couldn't stop coughing when I got him home from the hospital. And at first they said it's asthma, and then it turned out to be a really rare illness called plastic bronchitis, which is almost like, but not quite, waking up with cystic fibrosis. You see, when a person has a heart reconstructive surgery, the standard of care is something called the Fontan, which basically reroutes the blood to the lungs. It says, listen, everything inside the body's not going great, the right parts aren't getting, the blood isn't getting the right oxygen, so let's just reroute the whole thing to the lungs to get its oxygen. Then it will go back to the heart, which is now a passive pumping system. So it kind of goes heart, body, lungs, heart, body, lungs, just like that. And there's tunnels in the heart made of Gore-Tex, and everything is pretty good until you get a complication where the lungs say, not doing it anymore. And we traveled around a little bit, went to Mass General Hospital and found an amazing treatment. He got diagnosed within about 3 or 4 months that it was definitely not asthma. And we began slowly to do some cystic fibrosis and other treatments. And then we found a one-off, like a miracle cure, where he would inhale TPA inside the hospital in a nebulizer, and he would slowly get better over a couple of days and get to go back to his life. Repeat that over about 25, 30 times over about 2 or 3 years. Throw a lot of prednisone at him at the same time. And now he's 15, and his growth has been stunted, and he's got the moon face and the side effects from the prednisone. And he's still sort of struggling to breathe, but we're noticing some of the symptoms are getting a little better, and he went into a remission, which was awesome. But then when he came out of the remission, one night I heard a cough, and I said, "Oh my God, we're back." And I was right, and I didn't want to be right. It turned out that the TPA wasn't working. We had to switch him to another medication. But eventually, after going back and forth a few times, we were offered a choice, and we offered the choice to him. He got worked up for a heart transplant. And doctors said, look, you can either be listed for a heart transplant, and you're pretty well, so it's going to be a long time, or we can try to reconstruct your heart, put it back to normal with a special bovine pulmonary artery, actually, and in the hopes that the plastic bronchitis will be gone. So we put the decision in his hand, and as I like to say, for a hot minute, he was really mad at us. And then we just said to him, it's your heart, it's your life, it's your journey, we're here for you, but we can't make this decision. And he said, you've always taught me you can't unring a bell. And I feel like my underlying heart is almost like a victim of circumstance, you know? It's doing fine. It just has all this rerouting has caused trouble. So I choose plan B. And we took him to surgery, and things were pretty amazing, because guess what? On that Monday, when he finally woke up from surgery, well, he was actually still intubated, but everybody's standing over me, and I'm standing over him, seeing if he coughs and if anything comes out. Nothing came out. So the plastic bronchitis was gone. So right dangling in front of us is this elusive thing that we've been waiting for, a normal life. And we think, here we are, this is great. And then everything changed again 5 days later. And what happened was, on Friday, it was almost like a party in his cardiac ICU room. Everybody was so happy. He's up walking a little bit. He had 3 lines in him, and they were all taken out. And he began to take pain medication by mouth. He was declining morphine. He was doing great. And his doctor said, I'm going to a medical conference. I'll see you later. And what often happens in hospitals, or in any business actually, is sometimes Lone Rangers like their chance to step up to the plate. And I didn't know this at the time, but I went to sleep. I was exhausted. He was exhausted. We were on fumes, but we were happy. And my husband said, I'm going to go home 26 miles. And I said, no, there's a bed for you in the parent sleep space on the other side of the hospital. I'll sleep here. You stay there. And at 2:20 in the morning, I couldn't sleep. And I thought, why can't I sleep? And there was this really little quiet beep. Now, I am a pro, right, at shutting out beeps that are meaningless, that you know, he's safe, whatever. But this one was nagging me. So what I ended up doing was actually just the 8th anniversary of this sort of watershed moment a couple of days ago, on June 6th. So I tweeted about it. I'm as you've probably seen, Boston Heart Mom. And I tweeted about it, and I said we came really close to losing him 50 days before he turned 16. And how I described it was, after an epic open heart Fontan takedown surgery, he had all his lines removed. You know, he'd coughed and gasped his way through 4 years. And I was staring at this bank of monitors, and I realized something pretty shocking, and I thought I was asleep. It was like that cartoon character where you rub your eyes and you think you're going to see something else. I'm watching his heart rate, right? And his heart rate is 70. But I know that his new pacemaker has been set to a lower threshold of 90, right? So how is it possible that his underlying rhythm is overriding the pacemaker and he's beating below it? And of course, my nurse was at dinner, so I grabbed the nurse in the next room, and we were just puzzling together when he stopped breathing, briefly, for just a few seconds. He flatlined, all the lights go on, everybody crashes in the room. We called the code. And everybody's shaking their heads going, what is this, what is this? And they essentially, he comes right back. He comes to, what's going on? And I said, we don't know. You're okay, though. I'm right here. You're safe. You're okay. And then it happened again, about 20 or 30 minutes later. They hadn't even taken the crash cart out of the room. And it was, again, quick. But now I've called my husband, and people start coming in the room. And it's hours that go by. And I've got 3 chiefs and about 15 to 18 people in the room. And all the lights are on, and he can't have any medication, and we're just trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And I actually felt in those hours like part of the team, because I was gowned, gloved, and masked. I was given breaks and protein and told, you have to get back in here and keep him calm. We've got to put in an IJ line, or we've got to do this or that. And finally, at about 9:30 in the morning, they said, then they're doing this, could it be this, could it be that? And they say, could it be we stopped the prednisone? And I said, you did what? Why would you do that? It's written in the chart. I vetted it. I went to 13 specialists. Each one of them saw him and tested him. And they all have orders in the chart. It's supposed to be a 6-month taper. He's got adrenal insufficiency. What the hell? And they all kind of looked at me, and in that moment, my relationship with them changed, because they stopped looking me in the eye. And they knew that was what had happened. And even 6 weeks later, he was still in the hospital because something wasn't right. And we had turned some things around, but he was bouncing between the floor and the ICU. And we didn't find out until August 1st, basically 2 months after surgery, that he had blown his brand new stitches. And that's what happened when he flatlined. And we didn't have pictures of his heart, so we didn't know that. And he was developed this condition where fluid is going in the wrong way, and it causes a big belly called ascites. And they don't know what to do now. So he ended up getting sicker before he got better, because they had to test and find out what was wrong with him. From that, he developed an infection. From that, he was put on big antibiotics. From that, he developed renal failure. So it was just the year from hell. But when we came through it all, we were stronger as a family, and we knew that if one thing was going to be sure, it was going to be, and as he has said in his talks, this wasn't going to define him. We were going to be able to get past this somehow. We came so close, right, to that elusive, perfect life that was dangling in front of us. We could do it. We had the grit and the determination to keep on going. And so at the end of my tweet stream, I wrote, really what's important is, as Ram Dass said, we're all in this together. We're all just walking each other home. And so I just pleaded with people, lead with kindness and with heart. Why? Because I didn't get that from the hospital. They never acknowledged there was an error. They never apologized for the error. They, even though they gave him a bolus of prednisone and things immediately turned around, and 8 years later, we're still waiting for that, but actually, # we're not waiting anymore. We're telling our story. And so you can see that my medical odyssey really turned into had 5 phases to it. And after we got through that, 2009 pretty challenging year. He spent 200 nights in the hospital that year alone. He had to have a bunch of paracentesis taps the next year to keep managing this abdomen, and then they figured out a fix where he could do some draining at home. Eventually his heart got a little more used to this, and things were good, and he was able to go off to college. He graduated high school on time, and things sort of moved on. And that kind of brings me back to the middle period of time. And I just wanted to share that, and these are some of Jamie's words when we look back on this and we talk about it. We get new perspective, I think, each time. That this was a watershed moment. And my realization at that moment was not only did I need to learn to navigate the system for him, which I had quit my job sort of 12 years earlier to be his full-time case manager because it just got too complicated, and I was blessed to be able to do that. My husband has a great job and good health insurance. We're very blessed in that. But not only did I have to become an active, fully engaged, all-in, 24/7 case manager, but in that moment, we realized it had become a dire necessity because in that life or death moment, I knew more about what was happening to Jamie than they did. And so over those 6 or 7 hours, I was the one that knew the answers to the questions. Why are his platelets low? They've been low for 8 years. Oh, take that off the table. Thing after thing after thing, I was able to fill in the pieces. And after collecting dots, I was telling Naveen, I really think your job starts as collecting dots, and then you connect dots. I was able to connect the dots for them. And there were, as I said, 3 chiefs in that room. So the question we have to ask is why, I mean, thank God, but why was I assuming the role of medical expert? Actually, I wasn't, but I was the expert on him. And so stepping up wasn't even a question. I was all in from the moment he was born. But we have to look at who we're tasking with which responsibilities. And if you're really going to put the patient and family at the center of the team, then really do it. We can add so much. And I don't want to get us off the track, but certainly this unconference is about positivity, but I think what happened to us is an indictment against the system and also against empathy, because we should have been shown empathy. And he has a talk actually up on Facebook about how he couldn't even hear about the error for a while because it was hard for him to watch me ask questions at every visit and even on a patient safety and quality committee and sort of get no answers. But life goes on, and so my favorite idea is that I am a ninja, that I am sort of a ninja mom, and that I love it. I mean, I would love for him to have not had this condition at birth, but we've found a lot of silver linings within it. So if we were to say I'm a medical mom, that's really my superpower. And so this is just a recap of some of the numbers. I'm kind of a numbers nerd, having been a former finance girl. But I just want to skip quickly through some tools that have helped me, and then some props that you may find interesting. And the tool list will be up on the site after this meeting. Again, because I was a quality improvement person, I knew the inside workings of the hospital, but I was lucky enough to apply a lot of that externally into Jamie's life. And I just want to talk about becoming an e-patient, engaged, empowered, enlightened, or an e-mom. One of my friends, Erin Moore, whose kind of place I'm taking today, because I was sort of grateful for her to give the referral to Bert to call Tami. Erin has on her pinned tweet, I hate the term patient engagement. No one is more engaged, involved than the patient. I want researcher, clinician, industry engagement. She said that at MedX, and she's got 100 retweets on that comment. There's no place where we can go to get training on how to be a better patient advocate for our family. There's not even a book for dummies. So some of my advice is when you're going to the doctor, obviously make lists, keep journals, build notebooks, keep your own med list, keep your own diagnosis list. I kept calendars and folders, and my favorite show and tell, anyone know what this is? A Palm Pilot, yay, PDA. So 2001, 2, 3, something like that. This thing is actually still full of data. I just charged it in the hotel room last night, and you can read anything about any of Jamie's doctor's appointments, because I would write down everything that they said, and thank God for that. Also, MedList, my mother-in-law has macular degeneration. I think you can probably see this from where you are. I think it can be seen from space. But the funniest part is that if you could see the first version up close, it was like, and instead of why do you take this, it was who needs it? Because she has this lovely habit of deciding she doesn't need it, so she'll stop it. So her doctor loves her. And then the notebook thing, again, you get a lot of cool swag when you go out and start going to meetings and letting people pick your brain for, $40 here or a lunch there or whatever. This is a book that's given to patients through Mass Family Voices, which there's a national organization, Family Voices. What's great about this going to the hospital book is that it's got places for business cards in the front, which sounds a little crazy, but once you start asking every doctor that you see in the hospital that walks in your room for a business card, you'd be surprised how much they get it together and begin to do that. Or you bring blank business cards yourself and you make them stand there and fill it out. And just Post-its to flag things. And Amy talked about all of her notebooks and stuff, but sometimes you don't know when you're going to go, and it's just you stick this in the bag for the middle of the night type trips. This is just, I know you've seen the pink socks, that movement, so I'm in the pink socks tribe. Hey, Nick, if you're watching. This is all the IDs that I had to, get my picture taken, so just things like that. But one of the cool things that happened is that, two cool things that I want to share with you. One is, at Mass General, the very first day we were there, they said, we would like to invite you to family-centered rounds. And I was like, say what? And they said, we're going to come in your room every day, maybe twice a day, and we're going to ask you if you want to participate. We're going to have all of our conversations in the room with you if you like, and in front of your son if you'd like. So take this card and every day write, no, I don't want you to come in, we want to sleep late, do it outside. I said, hell no, I'm in every day, and he is too. And it was just amazing for those 2.5, 3 years that we were there. So when I went back to Children's, I said, can we help you, Mrs. Rich? Yeah, I want to be part of rounds. Oh, we don't do that here. Well, 5 years later they did, because on Family Advisory Council, which I was invited to join, I made my case to the parents and said, how cool would this be? Have you heard of this? And we got it passed. We were the first quality improvement team to have parents on it in the hospital. And it's a little bumpy, but to this day it's still working. So that's pretty amazing. Another thing I'm going to include is some patient safety information from the National Patient Safety Foundation. And one of the best questions I've ever heard that is a gift to patients and families is, you have the right to ask questions until you understand the answers. And in that moment, when someone is badgering you or pushing you or looking at the watch or listening to the pager or the phone or whatever, you just keep asking those questions until you understand the answers. We'll skip through this quickly. And one of the last stories I wanted to share with you is that through Family Advisory Council, I was invited to go to this event called Hacking Pediatrics in 2014. I had no idea what that meant. I was like, are we going to break into computers? I don't know what it means. And they said, actually, we've changed our minds. We want you to sit on a panel in this cool MIT classroom, and you'll sit with a doctor who's the head of IT and a doctor who's the head of community health and a nurse who's head of training everybody. Whatever the doctors say they want to do, they put it in the computer. What am I going to do? Tell us your pain points. I said, how much time will I have? And I held up a tattered medication list, and I said, how is it I can give you the med list? Who said this? Morgan? I can give you the med list at like 10 o'clock in the morning, and by noon, you've messed it up. It's wrong in the computer. He doesn't get his meds on time. He's been allergic to that for 3 years. This doesn't work. What is with you people? The game of telephone has never been more colossally screwed up. But long story short, people said, wow, you were great on the panel. You should pitch at the event tomorrow. It was this 2-day event. So I stepped up and I pitched discharge. And we had a number we had to take. We stood in a long line. I had to get my pitch down to 1 minute, and I didn't quite finish, so they clapped you off the stage. But a bunch of people joined me and said, we want you. We want the mom. I was the only parent there. And I said, you can do discharge in 5 steps. You can start it at admission, give people an iPad. Any questions? Like meds, appointments, log me into the portal. Seriously, why do I need 5 pages and 6-pitch font print? You know, that it's just going to be a paper airplane. But a crazy thing happened. First, we won an award at the end of the competition for to go into incubation at Mass Bio for like 10 weeks to build a business plan and run a business, and then we won first prize. So that was, every picture, this is the 3D printer, thank you. Every picture is 7 people going, like, because we were so in shock. So, and I haven't taken it towards startup yet, but I'm making new friends that are helping me figure out whether, you know, what to do with this magical, non-magical knowledge. So these are the things that I think are really important. These are my pain points. They're probably yours too. Things like med lists and discharge readiness and preparing for any kind of transition in care. And so whether we believe we're just like everyone else or whether we know that we're different, whether we know that we're a unicorn perhaps, we really we have really found as a family some silver lining and some wonderful opportunities. Jamie learned to become a storyteller, and he's doing a great job as far as I can see. And I have found a tribe and a group of people that have been loving and welcoming and awesome. A dear friend of mine, Kristen Lind, wrote an article recently. Her son was in the hospital, and he hadn't been in the hospital for 10 years. And she said, you know, I use these tools and tips that I didn't use before. I go to social media. I ask my friends. It's the things you've heard through the whole day. So I think that this, you know, might even be a nice segue, and I'll include it in this at the end. And I'll include the tools. I've kind of given you a cheat sheet where you can see, where do I write things down? In the notebook, and so forth. Not to be too, you know, matchy-matchy, but that's kind of the way that I think. But one of the most important lessons learned is the oxygen mask goes on who first? Me first. So I'm about to take a mindfulness meditation class. It's only 20 minutes from my home, the place where John Kabat-Zinn started MBSR. A friend of mine came up with a virtual reality app called Bliss that she lives in France, but she left a setup for me here so I can show it around to people because it's pretty amazing. And really, the most important thing is that I consider myself a part of my son's healthcare team. Whether they do or not, I am. He considers me a part, and that's really all that's important. So remember that you are the people that we're really doing it for each other. We're all walking each other home. He's getting to, I'm putting him at the center of care. It's what matters to him, being behind the camera even at that early age. It's not the old healthcare model is gone of what's the matter. And we've been really blessed, and I'm really grateful to have been here today. And that's about it. Thank you. Went a little over.
So, Tammy's going to be around if people have questions. I just wanted to say a few thank yous. I had a 2-hour wrap-up speech prepared, which I'm just kidding, I didn't, because I wouldn't want to sit here for that. But there are certainly a few people I do have to say thank you to. So the team who worked on this is amazing. They've put a ton of their lives and emotion into doing this. So I just want to say thank you to everybody who worked on this. It was pretty inspirational. One of the first things we did was we actually just created a video, and everybody on the team actually told a story about their healthcare experience and why this idea was even important to them. And it's just, I don't know, it was extremely inspirational to see it. So I want to say thanks to them. The people online, thank you for staying with us all day. The online community, for anybody who's not involved primarily in Twitter in terms of healthcare, is insane. Like it was incredible the support that we got from tweet chats like Hit MC and Hit SM and HCLDR and Patient Empowerment and We Go Health, and just like unbelievable support of people, and all day long I've been getting messages from people about how inspired they've been, and so that's huge. I wanted to say thank you to that world too. Nicole and the Grove has been great. The huge partners let us do basically whatever we want. We've taken over here for a few days now. The Brand Live people. So the last things I'll just say is, still, if you haven't done a commitment, we'd love you to do a commitment and put it up on the wall and take pictures. And for the reception, we do have food, we do have alcohol too. It's been a long day. I'm sure some of us need it. But what I would ask is that as you hang out at the reception, like talk to somebody you don't know, talk to somebody about their healthcare story. We really were hoping that this wasn't just a, hey, cool conference type thing. We really hope that people would actually hear stuff and do something slightly different as a result of it. So hopefully some of that will come in the conversation. So we're all here. Again, thank you all for being here. Thank you online for staring at us for as long as you have today. We appreciate it. And thank you.